Hello and welcome to the Soccer Media Podcast, our weekly look at the soccer media business and the business of soccer here at home and around the world. We're presented by Soccer America and produced by the John Shrader Media Group. We hope you can subscribe, like us, pass along the word that we are here weekly. Last week in our debut show, Andres Cantor joined us. Next week, it's Marcelo Balboa. Coming up on this episode, U.S. men's soccer talk, a couple of news notes with Soccer America's Mike Waitala, and our guest this week is Sunday Night Soccer's Taylor Twellman.
And someone that I had many beers with was at ESPN at the time when I was playing. His name was Tom McNeely. When he knew I was struggling with post-concussion and knew I wasn't going to play, he basically said, you should try broadcasting. I kind of wrote him off. And then I lost a bet to him, and he said, you got to do a game for me. It was actually in your neck of the woods. It was the San Jose Earthquakes against Tottenham in a, summer friendly. Mm-hmm. It was a barn burner of a game. It was 0-0. I never did a replay for a goal. And after the game, I called Tom, and I said, buddy, that had to be the worst game on television. And he said, actually, we need you to do one more. And that was 15 years ago.
The entire conversation with Taylor Twellman is coming up in minutes. We talk U.S. soccer, the World Cup, his advocacy for traumatic head injuries, and much more. Did you know your Soccer America membership includes a daily soccer television schedule delivered to your inbox every morning? I've been depending on this for years. Follow games from all corners of the world. Just click it on, see what I know about. Maybe I forgot about something. I check it out for a free 30-day trial of Soccer America. It includes all the e-letters. Go to socceramerica.com and click on any story. As always, with us now is Soccer America Executive Editor Mike Waitala to get a little bit of an idea of what's going on in the world of soccer this week. Mike, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. It's getting exciting.
It's time to start adding up the countries that have qualified for next year's World Cup, isn't it? And there's the name of a country that has managed to make the World Cup that may be shocking, Cape Verde.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting pieces of soccer news this week leading up to the World Cup. With 48 teams, I don't think you'll get a lot of surprise omissions, but you'll get a lot of welcome surprises. And, Cape Verde was a Portuguese colony until 1975. So they qualified for the World Cup, marking, same year as their 50th anniversary of their independence, and, having a huge party. It's an archipelago. It's 10 islands off of in the Atlantic coast off of Africa with only 500,000 people. So that'll be the smallest, second smallest populous country to qualify for the World Cup since Iceland in 2018.
So our friends who are fans of England must be relieved. I heard that relief among the fans that England has qualified and will be one of the 48 here next year.
Yeah, I'm sure, most people aren't surprised about that. But those of us who are a little older remember that the last time the World Cup was in the United States, England didn't qualify. And, that was also the tail end of the hooligan years. And there was a big sigh of relief among the organizers of the 1994 World Cup that England wasn't coming. Of course, it's the opposite now. People would be very upset if England wasn't part of it. So that was... that one of the many big teams that's going to qualify without too much of a problem.
And I know the people here want them to come and spend some pounds and some some American dollars when they come here. So the U.S., of course, doesn't have to qualify, nor does Canada or Mexico for the field, which is in its largest number ever at 48. So the U.S. has to tune up with these friendlies, and just in the last few days, Ecuador and Australia were in town, so to speak, and maybe things are looking up a little.
We've been talking for quite a while that this team needs some momentum, and I think it's getting there. Ecuador's a very good team. The second in South American qualifying Florian Balogun scored an equalizer in that game, making it 2 goals in a row. And then they beat Australia, which had been on a 12-game unbeaten streak. Both those were comebacks. Against Australia, it was 2-1, and you had 2 goals by Haji Wright. I think that's the goal scoring in those games, I think, is something that, is significant. You're talking about the center forwards.
Right. Yeah. And that's the important thing, right? Is that maybe that was a bit of a concern that not only do you have some premier people there, but maybe some depth.
Yeah, but I think the important thing about the center forward situation is, if you look back to 2022, the U.S. went to the World Cup. They were actually in Qatar without having really decided on who the center forward was going to be. And I think that's a problem. I think, that obviously, no matter what areas of the field, you want to kind of know what you're going to have going before you get to the World Cup. But a center forward, I find it unlikely that a team's going to have a great World Cup if they don't have a center forward. And now it looks like, Balogun, who was out for a long time, he's top notch. And then for Haji Wright to prove that what he does at the second tier in England can translate to the national team, his goals were really good. That's good news, and I think you'll have you'll have those guys, and then of course Ricardo Pepi, who hasn't been back because of his fitness issues. So I think that's kind of the big one of the many good signs of what just happened. And today you've got a former center forward on the show, and that kind of he's Taylor Twellman is a player that kind of reminds us of how important a forward is.
Yeah, Taylor's a guy who, with the head injuries, shortened his career and scored a lot of goals, more than 100 in Major League Soccer, but never really had that opportunity to be a U.S. national team or World Cup player, right?
He did well in the lead up to the 2006 World Cup, but that was the Clint Dempsey era. They had quite a few good attacking players, and he was left off. It was a it was a controversial decision by Bruce Arena. And, in retrospect, maybe he should have brought Twellman to Germany in 2006 because that didn't go so well. But Twellman, who, I remember when I first saw him when he was playing for Maryland. And, just the kind of forward I always admired, especially when I was a kid. When I'd hear is like Garrett Miller, who would get the ball in the goal with any part of their body, diving headers. And, they just had a knack for a goal and instinct. And Twellman always had that. He played in the U20 World Cup. And after that, left Maryland with 2 years left to play for Munich 1860. And he scored a lot of goals for the reserve team there. But that was a team that, didn't promote young players. And he wasn't going to go anywhere. I think it was a decision that that kind of didn't work out, except for the fact that it gave him some good experience. And of course, when he got back to MLS, he ended up scoring more than 100 goals. Was a terrific player, and now has been linked to the league for so long with his television career.
Yeah, he's one of those guys who's made a very nice career in his post playing, and we're going to hear from him in just a minute. Mike, we'll see you next week.
Great.
Well, this gentleman scored more than 100 goals in Major League Soccer and has been talking about soccer almost since he hung up his cleats. Of course, we know he hung up his cleats not because he wanted to, but because injuries forced him to. And he's become sort of the face and the voice of American soccer. At least one of them. His name is Taylor Twellman, and he's been good enough to join us. Taylor, thanks.
How are you, buddy?
I'm great, thanks. I appreciate it, as always. You are a very busy man, and we appreciate what time we can spend with you. Sunday night soccer is the new thing in 2025, and it's the big game of the weekend. And how has that, now that the season is sort of now in the autumn, literally, how has that worked out? And have you been able to get the matchups you want and been able to sort of fix the schedule the way you guys would like to make it the premier matchup?
I mean, I've loved it, John, to be honest with you, just because it's kind of where my career started with ESPN, in the sense that we had the game of the week. When you have all of the MLS eyeballs on your game, there's a sense of responsibility in a moment that's big. I think Major League Soccer and Apple TV, after the first couple of seasons, wanted to give a platform to the league, and I think they've done that. The fact that we're in 107, 108 countries, whatever the number is, and that's the lone broadcast. Obviously, when you've got the likes of Messi and Son and now Thomas Mueller and these players that are coming here, it only makes the spectacle bigger. I think the first year schedule has been solid. I think it's only going to grow from there. And I expect in year 2 of Sunday Night Soccer and Apple TV, I think you're going to see maybe a little bit more of a pointed effort to put the rivalry games on and put the games that showcase the league to those other countries that are now just seeing it. So I would say it's been a huge success. Everything I've heard from the viewership numbers from Apple TV, from Major League Soccer, the numbers are great. And it makes you excited. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to come over here and why I've joined Major League Soccer and their project with Apple TV. I've really enjoyed this season because of Sunday Night Soccer.
We've already seen this play out in the NFL where they flexed out a Sunday game because of an injury to Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals, right? And so are you going to be able to do that more as you go down the road? You talked about the rivalries, but sometimes the biggest matches of the year you don't know about until July, and it might be in September, right?
Yeah, and I think those are the conversations that are going to have this summer. We just flexed our first game this past weekend. We had Cincinnati, Orlando Sunday night. Cincinnati fighting for their Supporter Shield lives, trying to win their second Supporter Shield in 3 years. Orlando City trying to stay above the play-in game and make a top 4 seed. So about a month ago, Major League Soccer and Apple TV came together and they announced that was going to be our flex game. They moved that from Saturday afternoon to Sunday night. It ended up being a great Sunday in Cincinnati because the Reds were playing for their last regular season game to get into the playoffs. They played at 3:00. They got in. The Bengals were Monday night, so they weren't a factor. And then obviously the Ryder Cup ending about an hour before we came on TV. I would like to think that we can flex more games, but honestly, John, I think it looks easy. I think it is easy, but on the other hand, that's above my pay grade. That's got to be something that the owners and the schedule makers can I would say, come up with a good idea on it. I think you should be able to do it at the end of the year. But then again, if you set up the schedule in the right way, the first, I would say 16, 20 games of the season, which we pretty much have done this year, and we're only going to improve on that, you're going to get the marquee matchup. The Premier League announces their schedule way before. They don't flex games. Yeah. But they put that one game a weekend in this spotlight where the whole world can watch that one game. I think that's going to be the ultimate goal with Apple TV and MLS.
Yeah, with English Premier League, you know that Arsenal and Liverpool is going to be a big matchup next year and the year after, right? And so maybe when this league is 100 years old, it'll be that easy as well, right?
But to that point, you and I both know Cincinnati, Columbus, all of those rivalry games, they're going to be big because those clubs and those franchises are going to be strong. So right away, John, you and I could probably spend the next 2 minutes. We could come up with 23 games. It's the other ones you want to kind of make sure at the end of the year you're picking the right ones. And of all the games last weekend, they flexed the right games. Cincinnati, Orlando was the best game and the most impactful game.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier in the introduction, Taylor, that you started talking about this game shortly after you retired, even before you retired, actually. Why in the end did you pick broadcasting? Because you clearly could have done a lot of other things in this business.
John, I think broadcasting picked me because I don't think I would have done this. If you asked me when I was playing, I would have really loved and had an energy to be a technical director, be a president, be someone on the lines that can put people in spots to succeed, maybe a coach, but I really didn't feel like I wanted to do that aspect of it, but who knows? And someone that I had many beers with was at ESPN at the time when I was playing. His name was Tom McNeely. When he knew I was struggling with post-concussion and knew I wasn't going to play, he basically said, you should try broadcasting. I kind of wrote him off. And then I lost a bet to him, and he said, you got to do a game for me. It was actually in your neck of the woods. It was the San Jose Earthquakes against Tottenham in a, summer friendly. It was a barn burner of a game. It was 0-0. I never did a replay for a goal. And after the game, I called Tom and I said, buddy, that had to be the worst game on television. And he said, actually, we need you to do one more. And that was 15 years ago.
And then did you get the bug? A lot of us, when we were young, got the bug. You got it?
I did. And you know why I got the bug? You can never be right. You're always challenged to do something different. And what I mean by that is it kept me in the game, in the thick of the game. I basically played with everyone that was in the league. Then you go to the national team. That was the national team I was supposed to be playing with at the end of my career. So I was in the thick of it, but I got the best advice from Joe Buck when I started to pick his brain. And he said, if 50% of the listeners are upset with you, that means you're doing your job. And he put this seed in my head of saying, you've got to do the job. You've got to give your opinions. You've got to react to what is happening on the field. And more than likely, there's going to be a fan base that's going to be upset with your opinion because you're giving your natural opinion. John, you've now talked to me a couple times and you've heard me commentate games. I will give you my opinion. It's not always right, but in the moment, at least it's authentic. And so when I got that advice and realized it was the bug, I caught the bug because you can't, every game was different. Every game was a challenge. And yet it kept me within the sport. It kept me within the league. It kept me within a lot of my former teammates and former colleagues. So broadcasting picked me.
Of course, it was a St. Louis guy who gave you that kind of advice. Yeah. It had to be Joe Buck. You were a quotable fellow when you played, and you have been outspoken about lots of things, including how your career ended. Where did you, and maybe you know where it was, but when did you know about your voice? And I don't mean Taylor Twellman voice. I mean your voice, that you have something to say. When did you feel like you were there, and how did you find it?
I always, and nobody listening to this or anyone that's known me, well, I always had an opinion, whether it was the Ryder Cup that I just watched, which anyone that follows me on social media, I had many opinions there. I love sports. I grew up in a family where grandfather played for the Yankees. My uncle was on the PGA Tour. I had 2 or 3 uncles that played in the NASL, and my father played over 190 games in the NASL, which is a rarity for an American. So I grew up in sports. This is what we did. I gave opinions. They weren't hot takes. They were real opinions. But I didn't know I had a voice, John, until the post-concussion came in. And then I realized that if an MVP and a national team goal scorer cannot get the right education and the right tools and the right information, I almost feel like I found my voice because I feel like it was my responsibility for the rest of my life to be outspoken on it. And not because I wanted everyone to hear what Taylor Twellman has to say about concussions. It's actually about creating social change. It's about creating a resource for those that are struggling, listening, watching, trying to figure out any which way to feel healthy and dealing with something that I didn't know what I had until I found out what I had. That's when I knew I had a voice. Now, I will be the first one to tell you, nobody really wants to hear political opinions from me. And that was through my time at ESPN of seeing politics and sports coincide. The reality is people are listening to me because they like me or hate me for my takes on sports. They don't really want to hear that. So I've had to learn how to grow in understanding what do people want to hear from me and where is my niche, for lack of a better way to put it, of where I want to speak of sports. They want to hear from me, whether I'm on Scott Van Pelt, whether I'm on Sports Center, whatever it is. That's what they want to hear. They don't necessarily want to hear politics. But then again, you and I both know we're talking September 30th, 2025. Everyone's got an opinion about everything. And politics is at the forefront of everyone's mind. I just know why people are following me and what they want to hear from. And in a way, that's my voice. But I didn't find that until I got post-concussion and until my career ended. And that's when I realized my voice has a responsibility and I need to be accountable for creating change.
How do you balance that need to inform and educate people about head trauma and your job as an analyst on television?
It's a great question. I still am learning that to this day. There's often times that I miss the boat a little bit in getting on my soapbox when really I don't need to. I will say this, and I will be proud for a second. I think I've done a very, very good job of not clouding my commentary with my opinion, but using factual evidence of what I'm seeing on the field and what science has told us about the injury. Because the reality is this, is that in that moment when I'm commentating a game or watching a game in the NFL, NBA, WNBA, soccer, it doesn't matter what it is that the athletic personnel, the athlete, the coach, there's a lot of things going on. The best way that I can create social change on this in the conversation is just being factual while also making sure you can hear it in my voice that I am someone of authority, but also not being totally playing doctor on TV, even though at times it sounds like I am. So, John, it's not easy, but it is part of my responsibility. And I think the 2014 World Cup final smacked me right in the face, no pun intended, when Kramer for Germany got a concussion. It was right in front of our eyes. FIFA put their head in the sands regarding concussion subs and all of this. That's when you've got to be impactful. Use the moment for the benefit of creating change, not the benefit of Taylor Twellman having a voice. And a lot of people will misconstrue that. They think that this is about me. It's not. It's just I've lived it and I want to create change. It's no different than a cancer survivor talking about their personal experience in trying to create change. That's exactly what I am. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but on this topic, I've done a very good job of making sure that emotion is taken out of the situation, and I'm using factual evidence to more than likely educate the viewer.
Your game is soccer, football, American football, basketball, volleyball, lacrosse, horse racing. I mean, go down the list, right? These are problems. This is a problem in almost every sport that has any kind of contact whatsoever, which is just about all of them, right? Have you seen the kinds of advancements in all the sports that are necessary?
Great question. Is our education and awareness better than where it was on August 30th, 2008, when I got my concussion? There's not even a question about that. Has the conversation changed? Absolutely. It absolutely has. There's more empathy to that injury. There's more understanding to that injury. But if you want me to look in this camera and say it on this microphone that we're still not making stupid decisions when it comes to a traumatic brain injury within sports, I can't say that. We're still making bad decisions. Now, it's a very gray injury. It's not black and white. And sometimes that gets clouded when you're making these decisions. The protocols are more in depth. The protocols are more educated in how they're assessing these. It's not about the diagnosis of a concussion or a traumatic brain injury. It's way more still about the rehabilitation of that brain injury. And that's where this needs to go. But John, I'm not an idiot. It's not an overnight thing that can change. The conversation over the last 15, 17 years has changed. That's great. That's part of my responsibility, and part of my hope is that I can create that change and have a better conversation. We have commentators way more educated in how they commentate on a situation like that in the NFL now, in the NBA. But then we still also have commentators that want to go back old school and have something said. You can't be perfect. It's not going to be 100%. But now the crux of the issue is the rehabilitation of these TBIs in sports, and that's ultimately going to be a conundrum.
Great, thanks. You are, as I mentioned, the sort of face and voice of Major League Soccer. How much of that do you have to carry forward, and how careful do you have to be in your opinion making, in your observations, and not sort of step on the toes of the people who are signing your paychecks?
Yeah, it's a great question, because naturally people would think that because I now work for Major League Soccer and their project with Apple TV, that Apple and Major League Soccer consistently calling me, texting me, telling me what I can say, what I can't say. And I just got to be honest, that's not the case. That isn't the case. Now, in saying that, there's definitely a line where for an entire game, do you want to talk about how bad the officiating is? I don't care who's writing my paycheck. I don't care who's telling me what I can and cannot say. The question's got to be, does the viewer want to hear that? And I'm not always perfect on that, John. There are times when I can watch a game and a bad call, and I feel like I forget what I've been doing for the last 15 years. And I go back to Taylor Twellman, the player for the Revolution and the U.S. men's national team in 2006, 2007, and I get in that. And I have to remind myself, well, that's not what it is. But this is Major League Soccer brought me on board because, one, they love my passion for the league, my passion for the sport. They love the fact that I will challenge the parties involved and will call it as it is. But as I've gotten to 15, 16 years in the business, I've started to realize maybe what I think is that important maybe isn't what the viewer thinks. And that's still a growing period for me. There are still instances where I rewatch the games, which I always do. And there's part of me that watches it going, Jesus, Taylor, like enough is enough. And so part of that process is what it is. But listen, I mean, anyone that follows me on social media, bad call is a bad call, bad decision's a bad decision. And so I'll still do that, and I still do that. But I think learning in this business, you finally realize how far is too far and what's not enough. Can you go where you need to go? But it's not like I've got this bat phone that all of a sudden, anytime I say anything, I get a text or phone call from Major League Soccer or Apple TV. That's just that's a rumor that people like to use.
When you first started, how did you come to terms with it? And did it take you long to know that you had to be critical of friends, of former teammates, of associates? And to be honest with the audience, you have to do that. Was that a difficult transition?
On a personal level, you never want to be super critical of any of your friends. On the other hand, that's how I was as a player. I played on one of the best teams in a locker room with the New England Revolution, and I had guys come up to me, and there were egos in the room, but nobody was higher than the other. So if I was wrong, they told me. If they were wrong, we told them. So that's kind of how I went into broadcasting. But when the United States fails to qualify for the World Cup in 2018, and 3 of your ex-teammates or colleagues are on the coaching staff, that's not easy. When a team loses an MLS Cup final and they made a decision and you played with that player, that's not easy. But I will say this. Anytime I've been critical on air, it's the exact kind of criticism I would say to that person. And that's how I started this, is if I can't look them in the eye and say how I'm saying it and what I'm saying on TV, and I can't say it to their face, then there's probably something either emotionally with myself and how I feel about saying that, or maybe I shouldn't say it. And so I've always been that way. Now, listen, nobody will ever know, but my phone is always open, and I've had texts, phone calls, voicemails for the 15 years I've been doing this. And they will call because they know I will listen to coaches, general managers, presidents, owners, and they can chew my ear out, and it stays with me. So I have to be able to do that because they need to know that they can say how they feel and what their side of the story is. But I'd be lying to you if I'm saying emotionally, when you go into a game and you know it's wrong and you played with said guy for 8, 9, 10 years, or you know this person for the last 20 years of your life, that's not the easiest thing. But for the most part, I will say, post-game, John, I'll drop them a text and say, this is what I said. This is where I was critical. And if you got an issue, let me know. But the one question, Bob Lee told me the best thing, John, I think your listeners will appreciate this. When anyone calls me and says they have an issue with what they said, my first question and only question to them is, did you listen to the entire comment? Because you and I both know social media can make it worse. Mm-hmm. And the worst part of this job is family members or fans telling the coach, general manager, president, owner, this is what was said, without taking into account how they said it, the storyline of what they said, and where in the moment of the game did they say it. And 99% of the time, the answer is, no, someone told me. And that's where this gets interesting, because now the more they listen to it, majority of the guys are like, yeah, that was fair. Yeah. Or they'll say, no, you're an idiot. I completely disagree with you. And I love that, because I'm not saying I'm right. It's just my opinion. But 99% of the time when I ask, did you hear it yourself? They say no.
Yeah, facts get in the way of a good story a lot of the
Yes, they
time, don't
do.
they? Yeah. A couple more questions for you. You worked at ESPN for a long time, well over a decade. It's the 800-pound gorilla of sports media in this country and the world. How was it sort of divorcing yourself from that massive platform?
It was fairly easy in the sense that ESPN is a huge reason why I'm sitting here talking to you. The fact that they really took me on board, but educated me, and they didn't put gloves on with me. They made sure I needed to learn the integrity of the job, the proper way of doing the job. They gave me the most resources ever. The fact that a Bob Lee, Mike Tirico, Scott Van Pelt, Adam Schefter in that role of reporting, anyone and everyone was willing to help me, educate me. And more importantly, I was willing to educate them on the sport of soccer. And we grew that. We did way more SportsCenter hits and SportsCenter shows. I hosted SportsCenter, I think, over 100 times as a former athlete, as an analyst, which is rare, but I wanted to learn. I wanted to be uncomfortable, and they gave me that platform. But when they were making this decision to move away from U.S. soccer, move away from MLS, move away from the World Cup, move away from the European Championships, I had to make a decision, John, where do I want to go with this? And my first and foremost passion has always been the league. When I took this job of broadcasting, whatever it may be, in 2010, 2011, I wanted to make sure that I was representing the badge of Major League Soccer and trying to help it grow. No different than when I was scoring goals with the Revolution, playing in all-star games and MLS Cup. So there's always this little bit of a chip on my shoulder. Sometimes that chip on the shoulder gets in the way of being on a soapbox, talking about MLS and wanting to prove people wrong about what this is, about the league and all of that. But divorcing ESPN, it's a different way. It kind of just was the way the past turned out. And who knows, I could end up at ESPN again in the blink of an eye, because it was never on bad terms. It was just the way the cards were played. And I just know life is too short if I'm not going to do something that I'm passionate about. And I am 100% passionate about this league.
Final thought quickly. Another World Cup cycle comes up and you're not part of the team that's broadcasting the World Cup. How does that feel?
My resources and influence has changed a lot over the last 5 years. And I would do the World Cup if someone called, but I also know I am way more impactful behind the scenes, talking to people, meeting people that don't know this sport, don't know this league. And I'm a really important resource for these MLS owners to now have that bullet in their chambers, so to speak, of being able to say, listen, Taylor, can you take these people to play golf? Can you come have dinner? Can you come? So John, absolutely. Yeah. Now I'm not going to sit here and say, if someone calls and says, are you interested in doing the World Cup? And we've taken a few phone calls on that, we'll eventually make the decision. But first and foremost, when I took the job in broadcasting, it was about growing Major League Soccer and U.S. soccer. I'm still doing that, even though I might not be doing the World Cup in 2026.
In a word, how big is this World Cup for the USA?
Massive.
I'll take that. Taylor, thanks.
Thanks,
I
buddy.
appreciate it. Taylor Twellman, Sunday Night Soccer, and much more on Apple TV Plus and the MLS Season Pass. He's been with us on the Soccer Media Podcast. Thanks to Taylor for spending time with us. You know, when you join Soccer America, you get daily soccer on TV schedule delivered to your inbox every morning. I've relied on it for years to keep track of matches from around the world. You'll also get expert analysis, insider interviews, and in-depth coverage of the biggest games. Now, you can try for free for 30 days at socceramerica.com/free trial. That's socceramerica.com/free trial. And while you're here, check the links in the description to sign up for notifications when new episodes drop. Next week, another former player working in the broadcast booth, Marcelo Balboa. He of World Cup appearances, his professional career preceding Major League Soccer. He spent his post-playing career in the television booth, where he does mostly English and does some Spanish language broadcasting as well. A reminder to like us, subscribe, and please pass the word. For Soccer America's Mike Waitala, I'm John Shrader. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.